Thank you, Catherine, and thank you everyone for joining us today and for your patience as we got set up. My name is Megan Cadell, and I am CFILC's Information and Communications Technology Program Manager. I've been with CFILC for over 5 years now in a variety of roles, and I'm really excited to be here today presenting on Microsoft PowerPoint Accessibility 101. So first, let's get started. I want to share with you what CFILC is. So we are the California Foundation for Independent Living Centers, and CFILC is a statewide disability organization that administers programs and serves as a membership association that connects California's independent living network. So our members are independent living centers. There are 28 of them throughout California. And independent living centers are organizations which provide services for people with disabilities to live independently in the community. They are not places where people live. They're not group homes or anything like that. The mission of CFILC is to increase access and equal opportunity for people with disabilities by building the capacity of the independent living centers. And we do this through our membership and also through our programs. We have a variety of statewide programs. The program we're presenting under today is our Ability Tools program. And Ability Tools is the California State Assistive Technology program. And we provide a variety of free services for Californians with disabilities of all ages, including an assistive technology exchange, device lending libraries and demonstration centers where folks can check out different assistive technology devices for free 30-day loans to see if they work for you before maybe going out to purchase that AT device. We have a financial loan program for assistive technology. So if you're looking to finance assistive technology that insurance doesn't cover, that's a good option for you. We provide information and referral. We have a reuse program in partnership with organizations across the state where we take in gently used assistive technology and durable medical equipment and refurbish it and get it back out in the community and keep it out of the landfills. And then we also have a variety of webinar trainings and technical assistance that we provide on assistive technology. This webinar today is part of our ICT document accessibility series. So thank you for joining us. And if you are joining and you do not live in California, there are AT programs throughout the country. Every state and territory has an assistive technology program. And we'll go ahead and share that link in the chat so that you can find your state's assistive technology program. And on this slide here, I just have the Ability Tools logo. So I want to really quickly go over our agenda for today. If you joined us last week for the Microsoft Word training, a lot of this will look familiar. A lot of the accessibility features are the same in both platforms, but there will be some differences. So the agenda today, we're going to first understand the importance of document accessibility and what we mean when we're talking about an accessible PowerPoint presentation. We're going to learn how to find and use accessible templates. We're going to use the built-in accessibility checker to look for accessibility errors in our presentation. We're going to learn how to use a basic table. We're going to look at the built-in slide designs, learn how important reading order is in a PowerPoint presentation and how to verify the reading order. We're going to look at how to use unique slide titles for every slide in your presentation. We're going to briefly talk about how to describe images, charts, and graphs using alt text or other ways to describe images. We're going to look at tips for embedded media, so that's embedded videos that you might have in your PowerPoint. We're going to learn how to make a useful hyperlink, and we're going to look at fonts and color and how those can impact access. And finally, we're going to wrap up by saving our file to a PDF and how to carry over some of the accessibility tags to that PDF. On this slide here, I have a photo of myself. My camera's off today just to preserve bandwidth, but my hair is pulled back in a ponytail, and I have a green parrot on my shoulder named Dewey. So let's go ahead, and I want to give you a quick overview of what I'm using. So the software I'm using today is Microsoft 365. That's the version that I am using. If you have another version of Microsoft, the options we're looking at today may look slightly different for you, but they will be available. Most of the options we're looking at should be available in any version of PowerPoint that you're using. So if you cannot find the accessibility feature I'm talking about in your version of PowerPoint, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to help connect with you and provide that one-on-one support offline. My email is Megan, that's MEGAN, at cfilc.org. Again, that's Megan at cfilc.org, and we'll go ahead and share that in the chat with you as well. So today, again, I'm not going to take any questions about where to find things in your particular version of PowerPoint, but please feel free to reach out to me if you do need support finding any of these features. Our webinar today is being recorded, and we'll have the archive available online in about a week with the burned-in captions for you to view. And I did send out the materials I'm using today in the email for this webinar. So if you want to follow along with the PowerPoint I sent out, you can do that now or when the archive comes up. And in your email, you did receive 2 documents. So one was the PowerPoint with the accessibility errors in it that was marked accessibility review needed. And one was a PowerPoint where I cleaned up most of the errors, so it was marked as the accessible one. So I'm going to go ahead and click to our next slide here. And we're going to talk briefly about the importance of document accessibility and what we're talking about when we're looking at an accessible PowerPoint. Okay, so the first thing we want to look at is we want to make sure that our document is compatible for folks who use screen readers. And you might be wondering what a screen reader is. So put simply, a screen reader is the generic term for a program that helps blind and low vision people to use a computer. The screen reader will read or speak the content of a page to the user, or they can choose to have it transferred to a Braille display. And maybe it's not, other folks might choose to use a screen reader as well. So if you learn better with auditory learning, that's another reason that you might want to use a screen reader. So we want to make sure our PowerPoint is easy for folks using a screen reader to read. We want to make sure our PowerPoint is easy to navigate. So when we're looking at PowerPoints, this is going to be really important with the reading order. We want to have a clear reading order, and we want to make sure all of our slides have titles because that will make it easy for folks to navigate. So maybe you're somebody accessing your computer with a switch or a mouse stick or something beyond a traditional mouse and keyboard, making our document easy for people to click through and find the important headings and is really important. And finally, we want to make sure that we are clearly conveying meaning in our presentation. So if we have images, that they are described so folks who cannot see the image have equal access. And we also want to keep in mind what the document, what the presentation we're using, what the purpose of it is. So we want to make sure if we're making a presentation that we're using maybe in an in-person meeting or online, that it is easy for folks to read. So I'm going to take just a moment here and change the view on my PowerPoint. So 1 second. Come on. Okay. So now we're going to get into the PowerPoint and get into the system and learn how to use it together and look at all of those features we talked about. So the first thing, and can folks see my PowerPoint okay? Should I zoom in or is it visible? Please go ahead and share in the Q&A if you can see the slides okay, or if you'd like me to zoom in some more. I'll go ahead and increase the size a little bit. It's fine. Perfect. Thank you for giving feedback that you can see it. Great. I just want to make sure everyone's seeing what I'm seeing. Otherwise, it wouldn't be very helpful. Okay. So the first thing we're going to look at is how to find an accessible template. So there are built-in accessible templates that you can use that have a lot of the accessibility features built into them, especially the reading order. They're set up to have the reading order be correct. So to find an accessible template, I'm in my PowerPoint and I'm going to go to the top of my ribbon and click File, like I was opening up a new PowerPoint presentation. And I'm looking for a template. So in here, they call them themes. So you'll see I'm on my home page under the File menu, and I'm going to click at the top underneath where it has a couple of themes. I'm going to click the More Themes button. And here is where I can search for themes. So what I'm going to search for is accessible, and we'll see what comes up. I'm looking for an accessible PowerPoint template sampler that Microsoft created. So I typed accessible, and you'll see there's a ton of options here, but I don't know who created these or what about them in particular is accessible. So I'm going to go ahead and change that and look for sampler instead. Let's see, my PowerPoint just froze, so give me just a minute, folks. Sorry about that. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of the accessible, and I'm going to go ahead and search for sampler because I know on my computer that's what pulls it up. But for you, it could be accessible PowerPoint template sampler or accessible. Any of those keywords might find it. And here's what I'm looking for. I will click on it, and it says accessible template sampler. And I clicked on it, and it opened up a new PowerPoint presentation that has these accessible templates on it. The image you're looking for, it is a man using a guide dog in what looks like a busy city. There's some taxi cabs behind him. And it says accessible template sampler, accessible templates, a sample of the most popular accessible PowerPoint templates, fully optimized for use by people with visual disabilities. And you can click through this, and if you see a template that you like, you'll go ahead and select download template, and then you can start editing from there. And they do have templates here for education, for technology, and for lifestyle. So if you find one of these templates that you like, go ahead and hit download template and then start creating your presentation using that template. Just keep in mind, if you do make a lot of changes to that template, you may lose some of the built-in accessibility features. So try not to change too many things in those templates to make sure you're keeping the accessibility. So that's how to find an accessible template. I'm going to go ahead and close out of this and go back to my PowerPoint. So the first thing we want to look at when we're trying to make an accessible PowerPoint is Microsoft has an accessibility checker in PowerPoint. It's also available in Microsoft Word, which is what we looked at last week, Outlook on the web, and Excel. So there's a couple ways that you can get to the accessibility checker. If you're in 365 like I am, I'm going to go ahead up to my ribbon and look for the Review tab. So up here I have File, Home, Insert, Design, Reviews near the end. So I'm going to go ahead and select Review. And then you'll see a couple groups on the Review ribbon. There's one that says Proofing, one that says Accessibility. That's what I'm looking for. And it says Check Accessibility. Keep it inclusive. Let us make sure that your file follows accessibility best practices. We'll help you fix issues quickly with easy-to-follow directions or recommendations. So that's the accessibility checker. I'm going to go ahead and click that. And you'll see it opened up on the right side of my screen here. So that's one way to navigate if you have 365, one way to find the accessibility checker. I'm going to go ahead and close the accessibility checker so that way I can show you another way to find it. So this way should work in most versions of PowerPoint. So another way to access it, we're going to go back to our ribbon and select File, like we're making a new document again. And then we're going to go on our File menu. We're looking for Info. So mine says Home, New, Open, Info. I'm going to select Info. And here's the Info page. And there's an option here that says Inspect Presentation. So we can check for issues using this. So it says Inspect Presentation, Check for Issues. I'm going to click there. And it comes up with a few options. It says Inspect Document, Check Accessibility, or Check Compatibility. I'm going to select Check Accessibility. So that is another way to open up the accessibility checker. And it should open up on the right side of your PowerPoint presentation. So here you'll see I have my accessibility checker open, and it has my inspection results. So PowerPoint ran an inspection of my presentation, And these are the results it came up with. And so there will be a variety of different results you can have, and it classifies them into 4 main categories. So the first category is an error, and errors have content that makes the document difficult or impossible to read and understand for people with disabilities. So you're going to want to fix all of your errors to make sure your document is as accessible as it can be. And here you'll see my errors. It says missing alternative text, table has no header row, and missing slide title. So that's what it pulled up as errors on my inspection results. The next thing you might see are warnings. Warnings are about content that in most, but not all cases, makes the document difficult to understand for people with disabilities. So you will want to go through your warnings and see what they are and correct them if possible to make sure your document is accessible for folks. And I have 3 warnings here. So I have one that says use captions for audio and video, one which says hard to read text contrast, and one which says check reading order. Your result may also come up with some tips. Tips are content that people with disabilities can understand, but that could be presented in a different way to improve the user's experience. So you'll see I do have a couple of tips here which say duplicate slide title. So we will fix those later. So tips, you just want to once again look at them and see if there's something that you can correct there. And then you might see an option that says intelligent services. And intelligent services in 365 is where the automatically generated alt text comes from. So if you have that option turned on, it may suggest alt text for some of your images. So that's the basics of the accessibility checker. We'll be coming back to it a few times today, and hopefully by the end of this presentation, we will have almost all of these errors, warnings, and tips fixed. That is our goal. So the first thing we're going to look at from our accessibility checker is the tables. So one of my errors here says that my table has no header row. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. And oops, I'm sorry, I accidentally closed it. So let me expand it again. So it says table 4 on slide 6 has no header row. Let me click that. And it took us to slide 6. So here is my table. And it's saying that there's no header row. And you'll see on the accessibility checker that it gives you additional information. So it says, why should you fix it? And then it gives you steps to fix it. So for this table, it's saying it's an error because the table header contains column headings that help everyone understand what's in the table and provide navigation information for assistive technology software. People can set a screen reader to repeat headings when they read a cell. And then it gives us steps to fix. So it says to specify a header row, select the table and click on the Table Tools Design tab. Check their header row style option. So I'm going to close my accessibility checker for just a moment so my presentation is larger for you. And let's go ahead and fix it. So it gave us the steps to do it. So I'm going to click into, let me make sure I'm on my home ribbon. There we go. So I'm going to click into this presentation on where the headers should be. And it looks like I have a header. You'll see my header here is bold where the rest of my font is not bolded. But I did that manually. I didn't actually add that structure or style in to the table. So we click in here, and you'll see when you're clicked into a table, on your ribbon, it will pull up a few new options. So at the top of my ribbon, after the help option, it now says table design and layout. I'm going to go ahead and select table design, and that's what the accessibility checker had directed us to do. And now we're going to look at this option here that says table style options, and it wanted us to have a header row. So you'll see my header row is unchecked. I'm going to go ahead and check that box, and that indicated that this is a header. And you'll see my table did change. It made the top here a darker orange, which makes it really difficult to read that green text. And that's something we'll come to in a bit later. So it did add a header. So let's go ahead and open up our accessibility checker again. And to get there, I'm on my ribbon. I'm looking at review and then check accessibility. And we should have that error that said missing header gone. and it is. So we're looking at my errors, and there's no longer an error about the table. So that means our table should be accessible. And whenever possible, you want to be using a simple table. So please avoid using split cells, merge cells, nested tables, or having blank or empty cells in your table. Or having blank or empty cells in the columns and rows. If you have these things, it can make it really difficult for somebody who's using a screen reader to properly read the table. So ideally, you want to use simple tables whenever possible, and always make sure your tables have a header row. And when somebody who's using a screen reader gets to this point, it'll say table, header, program name, table header, program website, and then it'll start reading through this table for them. And if you'd like to make a table in PowerPoint, it's pretty simple. They have some built-in tools that make it easy to create simple tables. So to create a table, I'm going back to my home ribbon, or back up to my ribbon, and I'm looking for the insert option. So I'm going to click insert, and now I have my insert ribbon, and there's some groups here. It says slides, tables, and images, and we're looking for table. So if I click the table, it brings up what looks like graph paper. So here's where you could essentially draw the table that you want using this graph paper. And remember, it has the columns, which are going up and down, and then the rows, which are going from left to right. So you can select the size of table you'd like to use. And if you're trying to make a table that's bigger than this, the biggest option on the graph paper is 10 by 8. You can instead select Insert Table. And here it brings up a little menu where you can type in the number of columns and the number of rows that you would like your table to have. I'm going to go ahead and close that menu and get rid of this table on top. So the one we created, I deleted that. So now we talked the basics of tables. So let's go ahead and look at how we can ensure the slides we're using have some accessibility features built in. So we're going to go back to our home ribbon. And so maybe you're making your PowerPoint and you'd like to make a new slide that has a new table. So I'm going to go ahead and I want to make a new slide after my CFILC programs, and I'm going to put in CFILC's coalitions here. So to do that, I clicked on my slide viewer on the left side of my screen beneath where the slide is that I'm on. And I'm going to go to my ribbon here and select New Slide. And it brings down a drop down, and you can see I have a variety of slide options I can pick from. So if I would like it to be a title slide, title and content, a blank slide, content with a caption, you can select any of these. For this one, since we're making a table, I'm going to select title and content. So that way, this new slide, it has on here a place for me to enter my title, and it also has a place for me to put content. And I can choose by going to Insert to make that a quick table. So here you'll see I inserted a new table that has 2 columns and 4 rows. And then we can also add the title here. So I'm going to add CFILC Coalitions is the name of that. So here's the simple table. You can start filling it in. This first row here is already marked to be a header. So that's the basics of using the built-in slide designs. You want to make sure you're using these options whenever possible so that your PowerPoint, when the screen reader gets to that point, it'll read in the proper order. And today I'm using a template my organization created. So if your organization has a template that they would like you to do when you're doing presentations, that is okay. And your options under New Slide may look pretty different from mine. Mine look this way because they're part of the template that I'm working from. So that's using built-in slides and making sure we're following, just using the built-in templates here to make sure our slides are accessible. Okay, and then one thing to note though, if your organization does have a template that they would like you to work from, it's really important to make sure that template is accessible, and that way anybody else at your organization who is making a PowerPoint from that template has the built-in accessibility features. So If you have a template, go through it after you get off today's webinar and see if it is accessible, and if not, maybe suggest some of those changes so that way you have built-in accessibility. So I'm going to go ahead and close my accessibility checker for just a minute. So the next thing we're going to look at is reading order. And reading order is really, really important in PowerPoint. So I'm going to go to my slide here at slide 8 that says CFILC programs. And this slide has a variety of our program logos on it. So if I was a visual user and I get to this slide, I'm probably going to read it the way most visual users would read this slide, which is we usually start on the top left and read left to right and top to bottom. So this slide, if I were a visual reader, when I got to it, it would look something like this for me. I would see CFILC programs, and then I'd read the logos in order. So I'd maybe see Digital Access Project, Freedom Tech, Membership, Public Policy, Ability Tools, Do Network, Disability Disaster Access and Resources, and Yo Disabled and Proud. So I'm visually reading on this slide from top to bottom. A screen reader is going to read the slide based on the order that the content was added to the slide, not necessarily top to bottom. So if you're starting on a slide that's blank and you're adding content to it, the screen reader is going to read it based on the order you added that content, not based on where that content is on your slide. So you want to make sure your reading order is accurate for folks, so that way when they get to this slide, it will read to them as it would a visual user. So let me pull up the selection pane. That's what we're looking for, and that's where we can change the reading order. And you folks can then see what the reading order on this slide looks like, because it's not at all the order I read it out in. So to get to the selection pane, you're on your home menu, and you're going to look for the drawing group. So I have clipboard, slides, font, paragraph, drawing. And under drawing, there's a button that says arrange. I'm going to click that, and it brings up a drop-down menu with a lot of options. The one I'm looking for is at the very bottom of the menu, and it says selection pane. Display the selection pane. See a list of all your objects. This makes it easier to select, change their order, or change their visibility. So let's go ahead and open that up. And you'll see my selection pane is now on the right side of my PowerPoint, and it's showing me the order that this all of the images in here are being read in. And a really important note, so if you're looking at the selection pane, it actually is reading from the bottom to the top. So whatever is at the bottom of the list is the first thing that's going to be read when a screen reader user gets to it, and it'll start from the bottom and go to the top. So whatever's at the top of the list is the last thing that'll be read when a screen reader user gets to it. So let's look through here and see what this slide looks like if I'm a screen reader user. And you'll see as I click on these, it's highlighting the logo on the PowerPoint slide for you to kind of get an idea of where it's pointing people. So if I'm using a screen reader and I get to this slide, the first thing it's going to read to me is picture 2. And picture 2 is the Do Network logo on the bottom left corner of this slide. Remember when we went through and read visually, the first thing we read was CFILC programs. So that's not at all the same order. The next thing it's going to read is picture 4, which is our Freedom Tech logo, and that's in the top right corner. And then it's going to read picture 5, which is the Yo Disabled and Proud logo in the bottom right corner. And then picture 6, which is the Ability Tools logo in the middle. Picture 3, which is the Digital Access Project logo on the top. Then it will read rectangle 11, so it'll say CFILC programs, which is the title of the slide, and it's going to say that near the end, so that's kind of odd. And then it's going to say text box 8, which is where it says membership or public policy. And the last thing this slide will read, if you're using a screen reader, is it'll say our Disability Disaster Access and Resources program. So we can tell this reading order is not matching the visual reading order. So how do we fix it? So we're in the selection pane, and we have the option in here to just click on one of these and move them around. So we're going to do that in just a moment. Okay, thank you. So we want to make sure our title is the first thing that's read. So I'm going to click that, and our title's CFILC programs is rectangle 11. So I'm going to click rectangle 11 in my selection pane and drag that to the bottom because I want that to be read first. Remember, the selection pane is reading bottom to top. The next thing I would like to be read is the digital access project, which is picture three. So on my selection pane, I will select picture 3 and move that right above rectangle 11. I would then like it to read Freedom Tech, so that is picture 4. Let's go ahead and move that down in order. And then I want it to read Membership Public Policy. That says text box 8. That's way at the top. Let's go ahead and move that down. I then want it to read Ability Tools, which is picture 6. If you prefer to not grab and drag, you can also use these little arrows to move the content up and down. So I'm going to use the arrow to move the picture 6 down, and you can watch it go down on the list as I click the arrow. So it put it beneath picture 5, and now it put it beneath picture 2. So now it's in order, because remember, we're reading top to bottom on the selection pane. Next, I want the Do Network logo. It looks like that's already in the correct place. That's nice. And then our Disability Disaster Access and Resources, I will switch that. That is not in the right place. Whoops. Let's see. Okay, and then we should end here with our last one. So now this is in order. And when a screen reader user gets to it, it will read in the same way that a visual user would. So that's how to find it using the selection pane. And you may be wondering what this little eyeball is. I think that this might only be in 365. If it is in another version, it would have the same feature though. And the eyeball is actually hiding something from this slide. So I'll go ahead and show you. I'm going to hide the title, which is the CFILC programs at the top. I'm going to click that eyeball, and now you'll see it's hidden from my slide. It looks like it's not there. So only hide things that you don't want somebody who's using a screen reader to be able to read. So you're only going to hide things that are maybe decorative, like a border or something like that. Otherwise, you probably don't want to hide it. And it looks like we have a question. So Lizette's asking, are animations in PowerPoint a no-go? So that's a bit more advanced. We're just doing basics today of PowerPoint. I'm not going to say that animations are a no-no. You can use them, but you do want to make sure that they're accessible. So that's not going to be covered today. I'm sorry, Lizette, but good question, and thank you for asking that. So let's get back to the selection pane. So now this is all in order, and I'm going to go ahead and close my selection pane and come back to my accessibility checker. And remember, to get there on 365, it's review and then check accessibility. Okay, so on my accessibility checker, I want to see if it's still saying my reading order is off. And it is. Under warnings, it says check reading order for slide 8. So I went ahead and clicked that. This is slide 8 that we just adjusted. So we know that the reading order is correct, but it's still coming up as a warning on here. And you may see that. So if you have a slide where the content is all, where you entered the content, so you're not using one of the pre-built slide templates, it may always flag it as being incorrect reading order just because there's no kind of background reading order built into the slide. So it's still flagged here, but we checked it and we know it's okay. There is a feature in 365 that can be a little bit confusing. So if I were to click here where it says slide 8 and says check reading order, it's going to give me the option to verify object order. And it's going to pull up a reading order menu. And remember earlier we were in selection pane, and selection pane is going to be where you verify the reading order for all versions of PowerPoint, but 365 also has a reading order menu, and it's a little bit confusing. So when we're at the selection pane, remember we're reading from the bottom up. However, on 365, the reading order menu reads from the top to the bottom. So just keep in mind of what menu you're in, and that way you'll know how it's going to read. So if you're on the reading order in 365, it is reading from top to bottom. But if you have the selection pane open where it says selection, it's reading bottom to top. So I know that's a little tricky, but selection pane is bottom to top and reading order is top to bottom. So let's go ahead and close the selection pane. And we're back to our accessibility menu, our inspection results on our accessibility checker. So the next thing we want to look at is having slide titles and making sure we have unique slide titles. Oh, yep, so somebody said, can you repeat reading order again? Yes, I'm happy to do that. So if you're in 365 and you're selecting to edit your reading order from the accessibility checker, so I am in my accessibility checker here. It says check reading order on slide 8. I'm going to select that drop-down menu and select verify object order. And it's bringing up the reading order menu. And this looks similar to selection pane, but it's different. So reading order is going to read your slide from the top to the bottom. And I'm clicking through here and you'll see it's highlighting. And I'm just verifying that it is reading in the order I'd like it to. So that's reading order. Selection pane, which is under arrange, and this one is available in all versions of PowerPoint, is reading from bottom to top. So just keep that in mind on which menu you're on. I hope that answered your question. So somebody says, if you change it in selection pane, will it automatically change in the reading order, but in reverse? Yes, it does do that. So let me show you here. I have my selection pane open. And we did change things in here earlier. And it's showing it's starting my slide. The first thing it'll read on my slide is rectangle 11. And then the last thing it'll read on my slide is picture 5, which is the Yo Disabled and Proud logo on the bottom right corner. I'm going to close selection pane and come back to the reading order pane. And you'll see the first thing it's reading is our program name on the top left. Rectangle 11, and the last thing it's reading is picture 5 on the bottom right. So it does, when you change it in one on here, it will change it in the other. Okay, I hope that answered all your questions. If you have more, please feel free to send them in. I'm going to go ahead and close the reading order menu now and come back to the accessibility checker. So we're going to move on to talk about slide titles. So one thing that's really important for accessibility is we want every slide to have a unique title. So every slide should have a title and every slide title needs to be unique. And in my inspection results here, I have a couple of things. I have an error where it says I'm missing a slide title, and then I have some tips where it says I have a duplicate slide title. So let's work on the error first. It says missing slide title, slide 10. And slide 10 is my disaster survey results slide. So let me close this a little bit. I know I have a lot open and it's hard to see. Okay, so this slide is missing a title. And this slide is a full image slide. So I just took an image and I pasted it here. And I don't really want this slide to have, oops, sorry, I scrolled ahead of it. I don't really want this slide to have a visible title. I like the title being, I would like it to have a title, but I want it to have a hidden title. So let me show you how to do that. But I'm first going to read what it says about titles. So on the accessibility checker, it says, why should you fix a missing slide title? Slide titles are used for navigation and selection by those who are not able to view the slide. So you should see on my left side of my screen here, I'm going to go ahead and expand it for a moment. It has the outline of all of my slides. So this is the outline view. So somebody who's using a screen reader or navigating their device with maybe a switch or a mouse stick, they can tab through here essentially, and it'll read them, each of the slide titles, and that way they're able to find the particular slide they're looking for. So the outline will have your slide titles on the top. So this one here, slide 10, there isn't a slide title, it's empty. So we want to make sure to fix that. And it says steps to fix. Choose the add slide title command from the drop-down in accessibility checker and type a unique description for the slide. choose the Add Hidden Slide Title command if you don't want the slide to show up while presenting. Let me go ahead and close that a little bit so you can see my slide better. So somebody said, how do I view it in outline mode? That's a great question. So you may have noticed actually when I was on my accessibility checker and I clicked on the missing slide title, slide 10, it automatically opened my presentation in outline view. But if you'd like to open it on your own, you can do so under the View ribbon. So on your ribbon, look for the View button. For me, it's near the very end. And then it has presentation views. So it shows normal, outline view. So normal is what we're used to seeing, where it has the slide deck and it shows a little image of each of your slides on the left side of your screen. That's the normal view. The next one here is outline view. And that's where it shows the slide titles and then any content that are under there. So it's under view and then presentation views. Thank you for asking that, and I hope that answered your question. Okay, so we want to fix this and we need to give our slide a title. So I'm going to click under my accessibility checker where it says slide 10. I'm going to select that menu. And then I want to select add a hidden slide title. So it has a couple of recommended actions. So we can set a slide title. So that is going to, the accessibility checker is looking at all of the text fields on your document and picking the one that it thinks you would like to be your title. And if that's correct, then you can set as slide title. If it isn't, if there's nothing on your document that you would like to be your title and you still need to add one, you can select add slide title. And what we're going to do is we're going to add a hidden slide title because this slide does need a title, but visually I don't really want it to have a title because this image is enough of a title for me. So I'm going to do that one. So I'm going to click add hidden slide title. And you'll see above my slide, it pulled up a text box. I'm going to start typing into this. So this is the disaster survey results is what this title will be. So I typed disaster survey results into there. And you'll see now on my outline that that does appear. And let me close the accessibility checker so that this is bigger and you can see it. And let me come to presentation view so that you guys can see that when we come to this slide, it will not show the title. So I'm going to come down here, and it's actually reading view, I apologize. And here you'll see that there isn't a visible title. It doesn't show up anywhere on here. It is an invisible title. So that way, if somebody is navigating through the outline, they're able to see the title for this slide, but it's not showing visibly on this slide. So that's how you can add a hidden title. But you want to make sure that you always at least have a title on your slide. Let's close the selection pane here. Oops, sorry, my menus got all changed around. So I'm going to reopen up the accessibility checker. And you'll see that error went away. So that slide now has a title. It's no longer showing up as an error. But I do have a few options under tips that it's talking about slide titles. So it's saying I have duplicate slide titles. I'm going to click into that on the accessibility checker. Okay, let's see. So it says duplicate slide titles. Come on. Okay, I'm going to click on one of them. So it says my CFILC program slide on slide 8 is a duplicate title. I clicked there, it brought me to that slide. And under additional information on the checker here, it does say why fix. Slide titles are used for navigation and selection by those who aren't able to use the slide. And again, we want to have unique slide titles, so that way folks are able to tell the difference between slides. So let's make sure we're adding unique titles. So that's what the tip is saying. It's saying I have a duplicate slide title. And I'm going to go on my outline here, scroll down a little bit, and you'll see that it is duplicate. So slide 6 is named CFILC programs. So that's the first slide in my slide deck with that title. And then slide 8 is also named CFILC programs. So these slides both have the same name so the accessibility checker brought it up here under duplicate slides, and it wants me to fix the second instance. So usually it'll call out wherever the duplicate is. The first one it'll say is okay, and then it'll call out any duplicates. So now I do see my title here is the same. So I do need to change it, and I have a couple options. So you could put something like CFILC programs continued, or more CFILC programs. You just want to make sure the title is different in some way. For me, I know that this slide actually is just a slide with all of our logos. So I'm going to change it to CFILC program logos. And let me change that font a little bit so it fits properly. Come on. Okay, so I have it as CFILC program logos. The font's still a little bit too big. There we go. Okay, so now it's all visible. Aha, I should do it that way, and then everything can be highlighted. So I highlighted all my text and I chose a smaller font size. So now this has a new heading, and you'll see on my accessibility checker, it's no longer showing that this slide has a duplicate slide title. So we have a question here that says, how do you add a hidden title without having to run the accessibility checker? Ooh, that's a good question. Let's see if I can figure that out. That's actually when I might need to connect with you offline on how to add the hidden title. Thank you for asking that, and I will be happy to follow up with you on that later, Lizette. So we do have one more duplicate slide title. Let's go ahead and look at that. It says Ability Tools Slide 11. And it just says the Ability Tools is the name of this slide. And let's look in our PowerPoint and find where else we have that name. So at the very top, slide 3 is also titled Ability Tools. So we do need to fix that. So we don't want them both to be the same. So I'm coming back to our last slide here where it's the duplicate title, and we're going to change it. So I'm going to do Ability Tools Overview is what I'm going to change this slide title to, and now it's unique. And you'll see that tip went away on the side of our screen. So there's a question here about a specific version of Word. So again, PowerPoint. So again, if you do have specific questions about where to find something in your version of PowerPoint, please feel free to reach out to me and I can connect with you offline to look for that. My email again is Megan, MEGAN, @cfilc.org. So please reach out to me if you'd like support finding features on your version of PowerPoint. So that is about titles. We want to, again, make sure every slide in our slide deck has a title and that every one of the titles is unique. So that way folks are able to more easily navigate through our slide deck. So let's move on, and now we're going to talk briefly about visuals. So we need to make sure that any visuals that are in our presentation are described using alt text, which means alternative text, captions, body text, or a combination of 3. So anytime you're adding a visual, and it could be a chart, a graph, a picture, clip art, anything like that, anytime you're adding a visual to your presentation, that visual does need to have a text description so folks who cannot see the presentation know what that visual is. And you want to, when making text or making text, when describing visuals, you want to think about the meaning of that visual in your presentation, and you want to convey what that meaning is. So it could be different depending on the presentation that you're working on. How you describe the visual depends on the context and what it's trying to convey. So let's look at how to add alt text first. So you'll see on my errors on my accessibility checker, I have quite a few slides or quite a few images in here that are missing alternative text. So let's go ahead and click into that. And it shows me a list of all of the pictures in here that don't have alt text. So let's start clicking through here. I'm going to click on the first one that says picture 3 on slide 8. Okay, so this is my slide with all of my logos. So it sounds like a lot of these don't have alt text. And on here on the accessibility checker under additional information under why fix, it says alternative text for images and other objects is very important for people who can't see the screen. Screen readers read alternative text aloud, so it's the only information many have about the image. Good alternative text helps them understand the image, and then it tells us how to fix it. So it says right-click the object, then select Edit Alt Text. If the object is meaningful, type a description. Otherwise, if the object is purely decorative, select the decorative checkbox. So I'm going to close my accessibility checker here for just a moment, and I'm going to right-click on my logo here. So I'm on the slide 8, where I have all of my program logos, and I'm going to right-click on the Digital Access Project logo, and you'll see, let me slide a bit, sorry. Got my screen zoomed in too much. Okay, so right-click, and you'll see it popped up this menu, and near the bottom of my menu, it says Edit Alt Text. So that's what we're looking for, is Edit Alt Text, and then go ahead and click that, and you'll see it pops up the Alt Text menu on the right side of my screen. And this image, I'm going to guess the alt text in here is actually the file path of where this image was saved when this presentation was put together. So right now, if a screen reader user were to read this slide, it would read to them C:\users\Teresa\appdata, which is not at all what this is, and it would be very, very confusing to the person using a screen reader to get to this image and see that. So let's go ahead and change it. So this is a Digital Access Project logo. And if your image is a logo, it is generally appropriate to just put what it is a logo of. That's okay. Maybe there's a scenario where you're trying to pick a new logo for your organization. In that case, you'd want to have maybe more information about it so folks can know what the differences are between the logos you're looking at. But in general, if you're posting a logo, you can just put that it's a logo and what that logo is too. So now my image here has alt text. Let's click through all of the images here and see what they look like. So Freedom Tech, it doesn't have a alt text at all. So let's go ahead and update that. Freedom Tech logo. And then Membership Public Policy, that's a text box, so it doesn't need alt text. Let's look at Ability Tools. So this one again has that file path, which is not at all useful. So I'm going to delete that file path and instead change it to Ability Tools logo. And then let's look at the other ones on here. So we have Disability Organizing Network. Again, it has that long file path. So that would be really frustrating if somebody got to that and had to see it. So I'm going to change it to Disability Organizing Network logo. And then we have this one. This one is closer. So it says logo for Disability Disaster Access and Resources. I'm just putting a logo at the end. That's my preference. So I changed it to say Disability Disaster Access and Resources logo. And the last one here is Yo, and it also has that really long file path. So let's go ahead and change it. Youth Organizing, Disabled, and Proud logo. So I'm going to, for just a moment, close out my alt text menu and come back to review and check accessibility. And you'll notice here under my errors for missing alternative text, before we started this, we had 8 or 7 errors. Now we just have 2. So we cleaned up a lot of that. So we described a lot of these images. Let's go ahead and look at what the other ones are that need to be fixed. So it says this slide here. So this is going to be really troubling or really difficult to describe. So this slide is the disaster survey results slide, where I inputted a whole image as the slide. And whenever possible, you really, really, really want to avoid using images as body text. If you have an image as body text, it makes it really difficult for somebody who's using a screen reader to know what's in that image. So I have a couple options here on how I can fix this. You'll see on this slide at the bottom, whoops, let's go up one, sorry. I need to come back to it. So on this slide, I'm going to zoom out so you can see, I do have a link here. And this link is to a downloadable version of this survey. So folks, when they visit that link, can download the survey, and it is all properly tagged. I know it's accessibly tagged. So folks, when they visit that, can download it, and it'll read out the survey to them properly. So an option could be, let's come back to alt text here. I hit edit alt text. So an option for this one could be, I could just write infographic of survey results, follow link to download, fully accessible. If I could spell accessible correct, come on, accessible survey. So that's an option. We never want to leave our alt text box blank. So even if we're describing a visual maybe on the body of the slide or as a caption, we want to make sure we always have something in the alt text box, so that way the screen reader user will know that we are going to describe that image for them elsewhere, that they're not missing out on that content. So that's an option because I know this is fully downloadable at that link and fully accessible. But if I didn't have this at a link where they could download it into a fully accessible version, then I may actually want to spend some time describing what this image is of. So I would say access and function needs disaster survey results, maybe in the alt text. And then I could put a caption on here that's typing out the results. So my caption could be type of disability. Out of 445 total respondents, 10% said they had a mental health disability, 2% said they were deaf. So we want to make sure we're fully describing images to give equal access. So how do you get alt text from this slide? So let me show you again how to get to the alt text menu. Thank you for asking that. So any image that you have, you can right click on it and it brings up this menu here. Hopefully you folks can see my menu. I have my Zoom toolbar overlaid. There we go. So it brings up this menu here. At the top it says cut, copy, paste like you're used to seeing. Go ahead and scroll down to the bottom or near the bottom, and you'll see an option that says edit alt text. And that brings up the alt text menu. So somebody says, can you copy and paste the link into the alt text box? You could do that, but in this case, I want folks that maybe aren't using a screen reader to also have easy access to that link. So I would like to just have it on my slide here. But you could do that. You could maybe put download image to read at this link, or just download image to read and then put the link. That could be an okay solution for that option. Thank you for asking that question. The last thing here on alt text, at least on 365, is it does have the option to mark as decorative. So this is maybe you have a slide where there are some visuals on it. Maybe you have a border or a separator or something like that. And it's not something that really adds any meaning to the presentation. It's really just there to be a visual. That's okay. And that might be a time where you'd hit mark as decorative. But before you mark as anything as decorative, just take a moment to think about what the meaning that image is conveying in your presentation. If it does have a functional meaning, then you should be describing it. And what will happen, I have it hovered here. So it says mark as decorative. Decorative objects add visual interest, but aren't informative. Example, a stylistic border. People using screen readers will hear these are decorative, so they know they aren't missing any important information. So if you do mark something as decorative, when the screen reader user gets to that point, it will let them know that there's a decorative item there, and then move on. So I'm going to close alt text. And let's come back to our accessibility checker and see if we have any other errors on text. We do. So it says missing alternative text, slide 3, I think. Oh, it's this slide actually, slide 11. So here on my ability tools overview, what I actually did is something I suggested not to do to folks earlier. So I went to our website and just took a screenshot of the overview of ability tools and then posted that screenshot here. So I used an image to convey body text, and whenever possible, we want to avoid that, because when somebody who's using a screen reader gets to this point, it's not going to read out this paragraph of text here unless I add it as alt text or add it as a caption on the slide. So a better option, and what I did in the version I sent out to you guys as a modified accessible version, is I went ahead and instead of just having a screenshot, I took this text and entered it in as body text rather than as an image, so that way folks are able to more easily read that slide. So whenever possible, don't have an image that conveys text. We would like text to be in your slideshow as text, so that way folks are more easily able to read it. So I'm not going to fix this one right now because it would take a lot of copying and pasting. So we'll go ahead and ignore it. But in general, if you have an image, you want to make sure it's properly described. And the last thing on alt text is that it does do some predictive alt text. So if you are in 365, there is a setting where it may guess what the alt text for your image is. It's using predictive algorithms. And if you'd like to turn that off, you can do so by doing these simple steps. So we're going to go to File, like we're opening a new document. And then at the very bottom of the File menu, we'll select Options. And it brings up the PowerPoint Options menu. And for Microsoft, anytime they're talking about accessibility or disability access, it'll be under the Ease of Access menu. So on the left menu, I selected Ease of Access. And at the very bottom here, it says Automatic Alt Text. Automatic alt text generates descriptions for pictures to make them accessible for people with vision impairments. Access alt text at any time by clicking Edit Alt Text in the context menu for pictures. And then there's a little checkbox here that says automatically generate alt text for me. I currently have it checked. If you don't like it automatically generating alt text, you can uncheck and hit OK, and it'll save that and it'll no longer generate the alt text for you. So we have a question that says, can screen reader users choose not to read items labeled as decorative text? So when a person who's using a screen reader gets to that point, it'll just simply say to them decorative and then move on. So it's just making sure they're not missing out, like they're not thinking that there's something on that slide that they're supposed to be seeing and it's not reading it to them. So they don't have the option necessarily to skip it, but it'll be very quick and just say decorative and then move on. I hope that answered your question. Perfect, it looks like it did. Okay, so let's go ahead and close out the PowerPoint options menu. I'm gonna hit cancel because I don't wanna make that change. So the next thing we wanna look at is font. And we wanna make sure we're using accessible fonts. So in general, for a PowerPoint presentation, you wanna have the minimum font size be 18, but 24 is ideal. So somebody said, how did you get to the PowerPoint options menu? So this archive will be available so you can follow along later. But again, to get to the PowerPoint options menu, I click File, like I'm making a new PowerPoint, and go to the very bottom of that File menu. On the bottom left, it says Options, and that will pop up the PowerPoint options menu here, which has a lot of options beyond the accessibility ones, but that's what we were looking at, was the ease of access. I'm going to go ahead and close that menu again. So let's come back and talk about font for a moment. So in general, we want our fonts to be at least a size 18, but 24 is preferable. And this is really important also because think about when we're using PowerPoint presentations for, they're usually something we're giving a presentation maybe in person if there's not COVID, right now online, but we want to make it easy for folks who are seeing our PowerPoint to be able to read our slides. So we always want to use as large of a font as possible, at least 18, we recommend 24. And then you want to keep in mind the type of font that you're using. So if you joined last week, you might already know the answer, but do folks know what a serif is? Could somebody in the Q&A share what a serif is? And it's S-E-R-I-F. When we're talking about fonts, does anyone know what a serif is? If you're able to submit it in the Q&A, perfect. So Brooke says the little flourishes. That is right. So when we have a font, a serif is the little flourishes on the font. It looks kind of like little feet. So right here, this font that I'm using, Ability Tools, the heading on this slide or the title on this slide is a sans serif font, which means that it doesn't have serifs, sans being without. So you'll see if you look here, there's no little flourishes on the ends of my letters. I'm going to go ahead and change the font to Times New Roman for a moment. And that way you guys can all see what a serif font looks like and why we don't want to select it. So here we go. I went ahead and changed it to Times New Roman, and you'll see my letters have little tails or kind of feet at the end of them. And those serifs, while they look pretty, can make it really difficult to read the slide, particularly for somebody that has dyslexia. It can make the letters run together more or jump around on the page. So whenever possible, we want to make sure we're using an sans serif font. Some popular sans serif font options are Arial, which is what I'm using in this document. You can use Calibri, Helvetica. I think I pronounced that wrong, I'm sorry. But all of those are sans serif fonts. So try and pick a font that is sans serif, at least size 18. And then you want to make sure that on your slide that you don't crowd your text too much. It's good to have some blank space or some white space on your slide to make it so it's not very so it's not cluttered and it's easier to read. So make sure to have some blank space or white space on your slide. And a final thing on fonts is you want to avoid using all capitals, excessive italics, and underlined text. So traditionally, underlined text is going to be for hyperlinks. So if you have a hyperlink, that's okay to have that underlined. But otherwise, we really want to, whenever possible, avoid using all capitals, excessive italics, or underlined text, because that can also be really difficult for somebody to read. So we're going to talk for a moment now about color, and you'll see on my accessibility checker, I do have a warning. I have 4 warnings actually, where it says hard to read text contrast. Let's go ahead and click into that. Oops. And it says the first place where I have hard to read text contrast is table 4, row 1, cell 1. So I'm going to select that. It's bringing us to slide 5 in the PowerPoint. Which is where our table is, and it's saying that I have hard to read text contrast here. Why fix it? Text becomes difficult to read when its color is too similar to the color behind it. Increasing contrast makes text easier to read, especially when viewing documents in bright light. So on this slide here, where I have a list of our programs, after program name, I have in parentheses hubs in green. So I'm trying to use color to convey meaning. And we never want color to be the only thing conveying meaning. It's okay to use color, but we have to have other things there to convey meaning. And this is really important for folks who have color vision deficiency, more commonly known as color blindness, that makes certain colors look similar to each other and hard to read. So we never want something like a chart or a graph or a table to have just color be something conveying meaning. So what I'm going to do to fix this, and you'll see I have green on orange too. That's really, really bad contrast. That's really hard to read even if you don't have color vision deficiency. So here, I don't actually need that green to convey meaning. I'm going to delete where it says hubs in green. And I'm actually going to come to our hub programs, which are Ability Tools and Disability Organizing Network. And I'm going to put another way to convey that meaning there, which I just put hub after them. So same idea, we just changed the way we're conveying it. And let's go ahead and change these fonts back to the standard color that's being used. So let's change them all. I went back and used the font that's being used on the rest of here, and it changed. So here it says a couple of those errors went away. It still has one. So let's see where that error is. It's saying one of these is still hard to read. Table 4. So this whole table, it's saying the color contrast isn't great, which I'd actually agree with it because it's orange with a red font over it. So that's really difficult to read. So we can actually change the design of our table, by hitting table design. Remember, there's the table design option, and it brings up this menu here, and we can pick one that maybe is a little easier to read. So I picked a blue table with it's a light blue with a dark maroonish red font over it, and that's a little easier to read. So you want to make sure when you're looking at color contrast that the background that you're using is enough of a contrast from the text that you have on top. So there are a few tools you can use to check color contrast in your document. So there is a group, the Tosiello group has a color contrast analyzer, and it actually has kind of little droppers where you can select the color on your document and it'll pull it up on their website, and you can select the other color you're trying to use and it'll show you how that color contrast looks. So that's the Tosiello group color contrast analyzer. And WebAIM also has a color contrast checker, so we'll share both of those resources in the chat, but they are free tools to check the contrast of your document. And a really quick way that you can check color contrast that's kind of a low-tech option is you can print out your document in grayscale. And when you print in grayscale, anything that's difficult to read on there probably has a color contrast issue. So that's the basics, but just the key thing to remember with color is we never, never, never want color to be the only thing to convey a meaning in our presentation. So we have a question here that says, how do you know what a sans serif font is? So the serif, again, is that little foot. So if your font has those decorative flourishes on the ends of the letters, that's a serif font. And you ideally don't want to use that. So again, some of the common sans serif fonts, and I'm up on my font menu to show you. So a really popular one is Arial. Calibri is a really popular one, as well as Helvetica. Those are all popular sans serif fonts. So we don't want to have, let me change it to Times New Roman again so you can see what those flourishes look like. So you'll see on Times New Roman, my C's and F's and I's and L's, at the end of all of those, there's little feet, and those little feet make it hard to see. Okay, it might just be because we don't have it zoomed in enough. But if you have a hard time telling the difference between a serif font and a sans serif font, just remember to use Arial. Arial's a safe bet. It's going to be on most of the word processing softwares you're using. Arial's always going to be a safe choice. So I know we're getting short on time here, so we need to talk briefly about links. So in our presentation, you don't want to insert the full, really long hyperlink unless it's needed. So let's go ahead and go to our slide where I had that link where you could download the survey. So I'm on slide 10. So is there a list? There might be a list. You can go ahead and Google, so it's serif or sans serif. So when you're looking for font choices, Google sans serif to find the kind of font that you'd like to use. So let's look at the hyperlink here for a moment. Oops, I'm going to close my accessibility checker so we can see a little bit more and come back to that slide 10. Okay, so at the bottom of this slide here, you'll see I have a really long hyperlink. I know what this goes to because I put it here. So if somebody were to click this hyperlink, it'll take them to our website where they can download this full disaster results survey. But I'm not telling folks that. So we want folks to understand what will happen when they click this link. So we want to always make sure our links have context, that they make sense out of order or out of the context that you're reading them in. So let's go ahead and fix this. I'm going to cut the link out here. And a better option would be download the full survey here. Oh, I can't spell survey today. Download the full survey here, and I'm going to hyperlink that. So to hyperlink it, let's go ahead and highlight, oops, not move it, I want to highlight it. Okay, so highlight and then right click, and it brings up this menu, and we're looking for where it says link. So for me, it's kind of in the middle of this menu. It says link here. And it's showing me all of my recent things that I've used. And one of the recent items is that link that I just cut. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. If the link wasn't on that, I could have also hit edit link, and it brings up this address field, and that address field is where you'll put in your hyperlink. So now when somebody gets here, they'll see download the full survey here, and they'll be able to click there and know what happens when they click it. If you do need to have the whole hyperlink visible, we really suggest using a shortened hyperlink. You can make free shortened hyperlinks at Bitly, so you can get a free Bitly account to have free shortened hyperlinks, and we'll share that resource in the chat as well. So we have a question here. What if you want to both click here and have the hyperlink. That way, if we send it out to someone, they print the document. So that is an option. So you want to make sure when you're thinking about links that you're thinking about the purpose of your presentation and who it's going to and who's accessing it. So if your presentation is something you're planning on printing, a hyperlink is not going to be useful when it's printed because folks won't be able to see that website URL. So if it is something that you're planning to be printed, we really suggest putting the link in as a shortened link using the bit.ly. I hope that answered your question, Alex. And a really important thing to keep in mind when doing hyperlinks is you never, never, never want to have the only thing you hyperlink be click here or open here. Because if you have a list, if you have a PowerPoint where you have a lot of hyperlinks in it, and all of them are just hyperlinked where it says open here, then somebody who's accessing this with a screen reader, they are able to pull up a list of the hyperlinks or the links in the document, and they wouldn't know what click here meant. So if I had 10 click here links, you won't know what it opens to until you open it. So you never want to just hyperlink click here. You want to give context to what happens when somebody clicks that link. And that's especially courteous when that link is going to maybe open to a YouTube video where it'll play a video, or open to a web page where a document will download. You want folks to have that option so that they know what they're going to. Quite a few questions here on links. So did that change? We used to be told the link was clearly spelled out and not a shortened word. Is that only word? So I think the bit.ly could work in both, but in general, just think about where your presentation is going and if you need to have the whole link or if a hyperlink's appropriate. So just think about what your presentation is for and what the ultimate purpose of it is. And one last thing on links is embedded media. So I have a slide here where I embedded some media. So on slide 9, it says Disability Disaster Access and Resources. And this is an embedded YouTube video. So actually, if I clicked this, it would start playing a YouTube video. It is okay to have embedded media in your PowerPoint. However, you want to make sure that the media that you're embedding or including has captions in it. So this video, I know this archive has captions, so it's okay to be included here, but you want to make sure whatever video you're posting or embedded content you're posting does have captions. So that way folks who go to watch it and that need captions will have that access there. So just double check that anything you're embedding has captions and that it is described. So that is kind of an overview. The last thing we're going to look at is how to save as a PDF. So if you have Adobe Acrobat Pro in your PowerPoint, there should be on your ribbon, there should be a button that says Convert to PDF. If you have that, that's ideal. That will copy over more of the tags and accessibility when you create the PDF. But if you don't have that option, you only maybe have the free PDF reader, that is okay. We can still create a PDF with some of the accessibility tags built in. So to do that, we're going to come to File, and we are going to click Save As from our File menu. So I'm going down to Save As. And where it says PowerPoint presentation, we're going to select PDF. So it pulls up my drop-down menu here, and I'm going to go ahead and click PDF. And I'm going to click the More Options button because I want to make sure some accessibility tags will carry over. So let's click More Options, and it brings up this Save As menu. And I'm going to select Options here again because I want to see the options for this, for when I'm saving this file. So here are my file save options. On the kind of near the bottom of it, it says include non-printing information, document properties, and document structure tags for accessibility. Make sure that this one that says document structure tags for accessibility is checked. On my PowerPoint, it was checked by default, but just make sure that is checked on your PowerPoint, and you only have to do it once. So once it's checked, it should remain that way. And then once you have that checked, then you can hit the Save button to save a PDF, and it should open up my PDF here in just a moment. And you will notice on on my file here, let's come back to the file save as, it did pop up a thing here that said, make sure your document's accessible before you save it as a PDF. So something to keep in mind is you want to make sure your PowerPoint or your Word document that you're working from are as accessible as you can make them before you convert to a PDF. So the more accessible the source document is, the more accessible the PDF will be. So let's come to that PDF I opened, and there's a few quick ways to check on the PDF reader if some of your accessibility carried over. So the first thing I'm going to do is hover over an image on my PowerPoint and see if it brings up alt text. So let's hover over this logo here. It says CFILC logo. So it shows that there's alt text there. I'm going to scroll down a little bit more, find another logo. I know I have that list with all of them. Let's find that. Come on. Okay, so here's my list with all the logos. Let's hover over these. Okay, so it is showing Digital Access Project logo, Freedom Tech logo. So that's a good hint that it carried some of the tags over. Another way to see if your PDF, when you're in the PDF reader, another way to see if some of the accessibility tags carried over is to have it read the PDF to you. And to get to that, you'll go to View, and then Read Out Loud, and select Activate Read Out Loud. And it'll start reading out the PDF, very similar to what a screen reader sounds like or how a screen reader would navigate it. And you can follow along and listen. And if it is catching everything that you'd like it to catch, then you're probably good. If not, then you might need to do some editing. And PDF editing is a lot more complicated, so we're not going to cover that today. I know we're near the end of the time. Does anybody have any last-minute questions? Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining us today. I hope that you learned some accessibility features and how to make your PowerPoints more accessible for people with disabilities. When you close out of the webinar today, a survey monkey will pop up in your browser. Please take that quick survey to give us some feedback on today's presentation. And we will have the archive available online on abilitytools.org in about a week, as well as the materials that we use today. So please, again, if you need support, feel free to reach out to me at megan@cfilc.org, and stay safe and have a great rest of your day.